evening and welcome to Springfield Career Insights. Tonight, we examine the quiet theft behind stalled development, the transformation of public office into private enterprise. Across Africa, corruption is no longer episodic. It is systemic, strategic, and deeply normalized. In this episode, we ask, what happens when every stolen tender is a stolen classroom, a clinic, or a career? How do we build a culture of consequence? And what reforms are needed to restore integrity? We are joined by His Excellency Dr. Godfrey Gandawa, President of Springfield Research University and architect of continental accountability frameworks. His voice is not just diagnostic, it is restorative. Welcome, President. Your presence is deeply valued.
Thank you, Advocate, for the generous introduction. At Springfield Research University, we believe that transformation begins with the truth. It's spoken boldly, structured wisely, and carried with compassion.
Thank you, Professor. Every stolen tender is a stolen classroom, a clinic, or a career. Let's begin with your framing. Why do you describe corruption as a betrayal of Africa's development promise?
Thank you, Advocate. Corruption is not just a theft. It is betrayal. It is the quiet sabotage of Africa's development promise because the public funds are stolen. It is not just money that disappears. It is futures. It is dignity. It is the sovereign right of every African child to learn, heal, or thrive. We describe corruption as betrayal because it violates the covenant between state and citizen. Africa was promised transformation, promised roads, schools, hospitals, and opportunity. But instead, we see inflated invoices, ghost projects, and elite enrichment. Every stolen tender is a stolen classroom. Funds meant for chalkboards and textbooks are redirected to luxury cars and offshore accounts. And so the child sits in a broken desk, taught by a teacher who has not been paid. Every stolen tender is a stolen clinic. Procurement fraud means expired medicines, missing equipment, and empty shelves. And so the patient dies waiting, not from illness, but from indifference. Every stolen tender is a stolen career. Youth employment programs are hijacked by patronage. Scholarships are sold. I read the other day 5,000, 10,000 Malawian per scholarship. Internships are reserved for relatives. And so the graduate becomes a statistic, not a contributor. This is why corruption is not just a governance issue. It is a developmental crime. It is the reason why Africa, rich in resources, remains poor in outcomes. It is why foreign investors hesitate, why public trust erodes, why reform feels like rebellion. As right for education affirms, corruption weakens institutions, undermines infrastructure, and perpetuates poverty across the continent. And as the state capacity research project in South Africa revealed state capture is not accidental, it is engineered. It redirects rands from development into the hands of a shadow elite. Let Eswatini confront this betrayal with clarity and consequence. Let us legislate transparently, digitize procurement, protect whistleblowers, and prosecute theft, not just as fraud, but as sabotage to national security and national destiny. Because corruption is not just a scandal, it is a stolen future. And Africa must reclaim it. Classroom by classroom, clinic by clinic, and career by career.
Thank you, Professor. What procurement manipulation tactics have you observed that seem to repeat across multiple jurisdictions?
Thank you, Advocate. Procurement manipulation is rarely creative. It is consistent. Across jurisdictions, the tactics repeat with surgical precision, refined not by innovation, but by impunity. Number one, it's bid rigging. Tenders are structured to favor pre-selected entities. Specifications are tailored so narrowly that only one supplier qualifies. Deadlines are shortened to exclude legitimate competitors, and evaluation criteria are weighted to reward proximity, not performance. Number two, collusive pricing. Suppliers coordinate behind the scenes to inflate bids. They rotate wins across contracts, ensuring each member of the cartel gets a share. The result? Artificial competition, real cost inflation, and zero value for the public. Third, phantom quotations. Officials fabricate competing bids to simulate compliance. 3 quotations are submitted, but all from the same hand under different names. The illusion of choice masks the certainty of theft. Fourth, insider information leaks. Tender details are leaked to preferred bidders before public release. They prepare in advance, tailor their proposals, and undercut rivals. It is not competition. It is choreography. Fifth, post-award contract inflation. Once the tender is won, the real manipulation begins. Scope creep, change orders, emergence extensions. The original budget is tripled, and the oversight body is told it's unforeseen. Unforeseen. Sixth, award to connected entities. Contracts are awarded to companies owned by relatives, political allies, or shell entities. Due diligence is bypassed. Conflict of interest becomes a standard operating procedure. Seventh, payment without delivery. Invoices are approved for goods never received. Projects are signed off without inspection, and the public pays for infrastructure that exists only on paper. I will tell you this, I don't know if you know, the Binga Road, Magunje Binga Road in Karoi. On paper, it is tarred. from Magunji to Binga. But the tour ends at Japan. Eighth, suppression of audit trails. Records are lost, emails are deleted, procurement files are misfiled, and accountability evaporates into administrative fog. These tactics are not isolated, they are institutionalized. They repeat because systems allow them, because oversight is weak, because consequence is rare. Let Eswatini confront this choreography of corruption with sovereign disruption. Let us digitize procurement, publish all tenders, protect whistleblowers, and prosecute manipulation not as error, but as engineered theft. Because every manipulated tender is a stolen opportunity. And the continent cannot afford to keep paying for what was never delivered.
Thank you, Professor. Are there examples where corruption directly undermines service delivery, whether in education, health, or infrastructure?
Thank you, Advocate. Yes, there are many examples, and they are not abstract. They are lived, they are local, and they are lethal. In education, corruption has stolen the future, one textbook at a time. In several jurisdictions, funds earmarked for school infrastructure were diverted through inflated tenders and ghost contractors. The result? Classrooms without roofs, desks without chairs, and students learning under trees while officials sign off on completed projects. In health, the betrayal is clinical. In one documented case, a National Drug Procurement Agency approved payment for medical supplies that never arrived. It's there. Medications don't arrive. Hospitals were left with empty shelves. Or they are still empty, maybe. Patients died waiting for medicine that had already been paid for. And frontline workers were forced to improvise where policy had failed. If you read the papers there, you will see this thing is real, like real. That's in health. We are actually killing people that are not supposed to die. In infrastructure, the sabotage is structural. Roads are commissioned, budgets approved, and contracts awarded, only for the project to stall indefinitely. Funds are siphoned through shelf companies, oversight is suppressed, and communities remain disconnected, watching ribbon cuttings for roads that exist only on paper. The other time that the president officially opened a very funny narrow bridge like this. These are not isolated incidents. They are patterns. They are symptoms of a system where theft is procedural and silence is strategic. And the cost is not just financial, it is human. It is the child who walks 5 kilometers to a broken school, the mother who buries a child for lack of basic care, the farmer who cannot reach the market because the bridge was never built. Let Eswatini confront this reality with sovereign resolve. Let us treat corruption not as mismanagement, but as obstruction of service. Let us prosecute it not just as fraud, but as denial of rights. I want to give an example of China, what they do. Because when corruption enters the bloodstream of service delivery, the nation begins to hemorrhage, and we must stop the bleeding.
Thank you, Professor. Lifestyle audits are gaining traction. How effective are they in curbing abuse of office, and what makes them credible?
Thank you, Advocate. Lifestyle audits are not just investigative tools. They are instruments of integrity. They ask a simple but sovereign question. Does your lifestyle match your lawful income? And in that question lies the power to expose, deter, and recalibrate. Their effectiveness lies in their ability to pierce the veil of the official decorum. Because while paperwork can be forged and declarations manipulated, lifestyle is harder to hide. Luxury vehicles, offshore properties, unexplained travel, all leave footprints. And when those footprints lead nowhere lawful, the audit becomes revelation. What makes lifestyle audits effective? Comparative scrutiny. They measure declared income against actual expenditure, assets, and visible wealth. Forensic precision. When backed by accounting expertise, data analytics, and intelligence cooperation, they reveal patterns that ordinary audits miss. Determined value. The mere knowledge that one's lifestyle may be scrutinized discourages excess and encourages transparency. Then we have pressure reassurance. Citizens begin to see that office is not a license for enrichment, but a platform for service. But credibility is everything. A lifestyle audit must be independent, number one, free from political interference, factional bias, or selective targeting. So sometimes we feel they target those that they don't like. So we are saying, no, it must be independent. Secondly, it must be legal, grounded in statute, with clear mandates and protections for both investigators and the subjects. Third, consistent. It must be consistent, applied across ranks, not just to junior officers or political opponents. This is common. They only do it to political opponents, junior officers. The big fish are left out. Fourth, must be transparent. Findings must be published, acted upon, and linked to consequence, not buried in bureaucracy. When done well, lifestyle audits restore faith at work. They tell the nation, we are watching not just what you sign, but how you live. And they remind every public servant that dignity is not measured by wealth, but by accountability. Let Eswatini embrace lifestyle audits, not as a spectacle, but a standard. Because when office becomes a mirror, not a mask, governance begins to heal.
Thank you, Professor. How do procurement loopholes enable inflated contracts, ghost projects, or even non-existent deliverables?
Thank you, Advocate. Procurement loopholes are not technical oversights. They are strategic openings. They are the quiet corridors through which inflated contracts walk, ghost projects are signed, and non-existent deliverables are paid for. Here is how the sabotage unfolds. Number one, vague tender specifications. When project scopes are loosely defined, contractors inflate costs under the guise of unforeseen complexities. A road meant to cost $10 million to $30 million without a single extra kilometer laid. You can see 20 million added. Second, it's absence of competitive bidding. Single source awards and manipulated shortlists eliminate price tension. The contract goes to a pre-selected entity, often at double the market rate. No competition, no scrutiny, no value. 3, weak verification protocols. Projects are completed on paper, but never inspected. Clinics are signed off without equipment. Bridges are declared functional without foundations, and payments are processed for infrastructure that exists only in reports. Fourth, shelf companies and proxy contractors. So tenders are awarded to entities with no operational capacity, often fronts for officials or their associates. Funds are disbursed, but delivery is outsourced, delayed, or abandoned. The public pays, but the public receives nothing. Fifth, change orders and scope creep. After the contract is signed, the scope is quietly expanded. Prices are revised. Timelines are extended. And the original budget becomes irrelevant. It's not management, it's engineered inflation. Sixth, suppressed audit trail. Procurement records are incomplete, inaccessible, or deliberately erased. Digital logs vanish. Paper trails are misfiled, and accountability becomes impossible. 7, emergence procurement abuse. Under the guise of agents, procurement rules are bypassed. Contracts are awarded without due diligence, and inflated pricing is justified by crisis conditions. These loopholes do not just waste money, Advocate. They weaponize it. They convert public budgets into private windfalls, and they leave citizens with empty schools, broken roads, and vanished hope. Let Eswatini seal these corridors. Let us legislate clarity, digitize every tender, publish every contract, and prosecute every ghost, because procurement is not just a transaction. It is a trust. And when that trust is betrayed, development becomes fiction.
Thank you, Professor. What's the broader impact of corruption on youth, especially in terms of employment, education, and civic trust?
Thank you, Advocate. So corruption does not just steal money, it steals momentum. And for Africa's youth, it steals the very scaffolding of possibility. In employment, corruption turns opportunity into transaction. Jobs are no longer earned, they are bought, brokered, or inherited. Merit is sidelined for nepotism, and the graduate, full of promise, becomes a spectator to a rigged game. This breeds disillusionment, it fuels emigration, and it converts ambition into apathy. In education, corruption erodes the foundation of learning. Funds meant for textbooks are diverted, scholarships are misallocated, infrastructure projects stall or vanish, and the student learns not just algebra, but the anatomy of betrayal. When corruption enters the classroom, it teaches cynicism before curricula. In civic trust, the damage is existential. Young people begin to see governance as theater. They disengage from voting, from advocacy, from reform. They stop believing in public service, and they start believing that survival requires compromise. This is how corruption manufactures a generation of reluctant citizens. Not because they lack patriotism, but because the system has taught them that honesty is punishable and integrity is irrelevant. Let Eswatini confront this crisis with sovereign clarity. Let us protect youth employment from patronage, shield education from procurement fraud, and restore civic trust by prosecuting betrayal, not just reporting it. Because the youth are not just the future, they are the verdict. And if corruption continues to shape their reality, it will also shape their response. Let that response be reform, not retreat.
Thank you, Professor. In some places, corruption is seen as just how things work. How do we challenge that normalization?
Thank you, Advocate. When corruption becomes culture, reform must become resistance. Because the most dangerous form of corruption is not the scandal, it is the shrug, the quiet acceptance that theft is tradition, that bribery is survival, that public service is a private hustle. That's what they say. We are hustling. To challenge this normalization, we must confront it on 4 sovereign fronts. Number 1, narrative reversal. We must rewrite the story. Corruption is not cleverness, it is cowardice. It is not how things work, it is why things don't. Let our national messaging reject euphemism. No more connections, no more shortcuts. Let us name it theft, betrayal, sabotage. Secondly, institutional example. Reform must begin at the summit when leaders declare assets, reject patronage, and prosecute their own. The culture begins to shift. Integrity must be visible, not just verbal, because citizens believe what they see, not what they are told. Xi Jinping, China. Corrupt. Verdict. They kill you. Everyone knows that. and people believe it. Third, civic education and youth engagement. We must teach the next generation that corruption is not inevitable. Embed ethics in the curriculum. Celebrate whistleblowers. Fund youth-led accountability platforms. Let young people grow up knowing that honesty is not weakness, it is leadership. Fourth, consequence without compromise. Normalization thrives where impunity reigns. We must prosecute not just the act, but the pattern, not just the thief, but the system that enabled them. Let every conviction be public. Let every recovery be documented. Let every citizen know corruption is a cost and it will be paid. This is not just a legal battle, it is a cultural one. We are not just changing laws, we are changing expectations, and that requires consistency, courage, and clarity. Let Eswatini lead the continent in this recalibration, because when corruption is normalized, dignity is devalued. And when we challenge that normalization, we begin to restore the soul of governance.
Thank you, Professor. What role should civil society and investigative journalism play in exposing and resisting corruption practices?
Thank you, Advocate. So, civil society and investigative journalism are not spectators in the fight against corruption. They are sovereign instruments of resistance. They are the eyes that see what officials or official reports conceal. The voices that speak when institutions fall silent, and when the conscience that refuses to normalize betrayal. Civil society plays a catalytic role. It mobilizes communities, educates citizens, monitors budgets, and demands accountability from the ground up. When civil society is empowered, corruption loses its cover, because every inflated tender, every ghost project, every missing invoice becomes a public concern, not a private secret. Investigative journalism is the scalpel that cuts through institutional fog. It exposes networks of collusion, follows the money, and names the untouchables. It transforms whispers into evidence and evidence into action. Together, they do what formal oversight often cannot. They document patterns, not just incidents. They amplify citizen grievances, not just elite narratives. And they provoke reform, not just reaction. So their power depends on protection. Journalists must be shielded from retaliation. Civil society must be funded without strings. And whistleblowers must be honored, not handled. Let Eswatini enshrine their role in law, not just in rhetoric. Let us create platforms for collaboration, share data, open hearings, and treat every expose not as embarrassment, but as opportunity. Because when civil society and journalism are strong, corruption becomes visible. And when corruption is visible, it becomes vulnerable. And when it is vulnerable, it can be dismantled, not by decree, but by collective vigilance.
Thank you, Professor. Anti-corruption efforts can be politicized. How do we safeguard reform from becoming a tool of factional warfare?
Thank you, Advocate. Anti-corruption reform must never become a weapon. It must remain a covenant. Because when the fight against corruption is politicized, it ceases to be reform. It becomes retaliation. It becomes theater. And it loses the moral force that makes it transformative. Across the continent, we have seen anti-corruption campaigns used to settle scores. Opposition figures are targeted, allies are shielded, and the public begins to see justice not as impartial, but as tactical. To safeguard reform from factional warfare, we must anchor it in 5 sovereign safeguards. Number 1, institutional independence. Anti-corruption bodies must be insulated from political interference. Their leadership must be appointed through transparent, multi-stakeholder processes. Their mandates must be protected by law, not by loyalty. Let them answer to the Constitution, not the cabinet. 2, equal application of the law. Reform must be blind to affiliation, whether ruling party or opposition, minister or messenger. Corruption must be prosecuted without fear or favor. Selective justice is not justice. It is a strategy. 3rd, transparent processes and public oversight. Investigations must be documented, findings must be published, and prosecutions must be visible. Let citizens see the process, not just the punishment. 4th, judicial integrity and timely adjudication. Courts must be empowered to act swiftly and impartially. No case should linger for years while evidence fades and witnesses disappear. Justice delayed is not just denied, it is diluted. 5th, civic and media engagement. Civil society and investigative journalism must be free to monitor, critique, and contribute. Let reform be a national project, not a partisan performance. Let truth be triangulated, not monopolized. Let us build systems that prosecute corruption, Advocate, not people. And let us remind the continent that integrity is not a fiction, it is a foundation. And because when anti-corruption becomes warfare, governance becomes collateral. And Africa cannot afford to lose its future to the politics of revenge.
Thank you, Professor. If we want lasting change, how do we build a culture of consequence within public service across the continent?
Thank you, Advocate. Lasting change is not built on slogans. It is built on systems. And no system can transform without a culture of consequence. Because where there is no consequence, there is no accountability. And where there is no accountability, corruption becomes routine, incompetence becomes tolerated, and public trust begins to rot. So, to build a culture of consequence across Africa's public service, we must embed 5 foundational disciplines. Number 1, codified expectations. Every role must have a clear mandate. Performance indicators must be published, not whispered. Let every officer know what is expected, not just in theory, but in measurable terms. Because consequence begins with the clarity. If there is no clarity, no consequence. Number 2, transparent monitoring and evaluation. Institutions must track delivery in real time, dashboards, audits, citizens' feedback loops. Let performance be visible, not buried in quarterly reports. And let underperformance trigger review, not a ritual apology. Third, enforced accountability mechanisms. Disciplinary processes must be swift, fair, and public. Fruitless expenditure, absenteeism, and procedural sabotage must carry real penalties. Let consequences be consistent, not selective, because impunity is the enemy of reform. Fourth, incentives for integrity. Consequence is not only about punishment, it is also about reward. Let ethical officers be promoted. Let departments that deliver be celebrated. And let public service become a career of dignity, not survival. And fifth, leadership by example. Ministers, directors, senior officials must model consequence. They must submit to audits, declare assets, respond to queries. Because when the summit is disciplined, the best begins to believe. This is not just administrative reform, it is cultural recalibration. We must move from a system that tolerates delay to one that demands delivery, from one that excuses misconduct to one that enforces consequence. Let our public service become a model of agency, integrity, and accountability. Because lasting change is not declared, it is demonstrated. And consequence is the currency that makes reform review.
Thank you, Professor. You have mentioned the idea of a National Integrity Pact. Could this be scaled into a Pan-African framework?
Thank you, Advocate. Yes, it must be scaled because corruption is not confined to borders, and integrity must not be either. A National Integrity Pact is a sovereign commitment to transparency, accountability, and ethical governance. But when scaled into a Pan-African integrity framework, it becomes a continental covenant, a shared declaration that Africa will no longer trade its future for patronage, opacity, or impunity. Scaling requires structure, and structure begins with alignment. So, number one, shared principles across jurisdictions. So, let African states commit to core tenets: transparent procurement, mandatory asset declaration, whistleblower protection, lifestyle audits, civic oversight mechanisms. These must be codified not just nationally, but continentally, anchored in the African Union's governance protocols and Agenda 2063. Second, regional integrity pacts. Before continental adoption, let regional blocks pilot the frameworks. SADC, ECOWAS, the East African continent. Each can adapt the pact to local realities while preserving continental coherence. This allows the contextual flexibility without compromising strategic unity. Then, number three, we have what we call Continental Monitoring Body. A Pan-African Integrity Commission must be established, independent, resourced, and empowered. It must audit compliance, publish annual integrity indices, and facilitate peer review among member states. Let it be the mirror and the measure. Fourth, integration with African Continental Free Trade Area and development financing. So, integrity must become a condition, not just a campaign. Access to trade benefits, development grants, and continental funding must be linked to adherence. Let ethical governance become a currency of continental credibility. And fifth, Advocate, civic and media engagement across borders. Civil society and investigative journalism must be mobilized continent-wide. Let them track, report, and collaborate across jurisdictions, because corruption is coordinated and resistance must be too. This is not just a policy proposal, it is a continental recalibration. Let it inspire Pan-African framework that binds not just governments, but generations. Because Africa cannot transform in fragments, and integrity, when scaled, becomes infrastructure, not just governance, but trust.
Thank you, Professor. How do we ensure that anti-corruption reforms go beyond optics and actually shift institutional behavior?
Yes, thank you, Advocate. Anti-corruption reform must not be a performance. It must be a transformation, because options may pacify headlines, but only structural shifts can purify institutions. And across Africa, we must move from symbolic gestures to systemic recalibration. To ensure reforms shift institutional behavior, we must embed 5 sovereign disciplines. Number 1, reform must be codified, not campaign-based. Laws must replace slogans. Every reform must be anchored in statute, regulation, and enforceable policy. Let ethics be written into job descriptions, procurement protocols, and performance contracts, because behavior changes when rules are clear and consequences are real. Number 2, reform must be institutionalized, not personalized. Anti-corruption must not depend on a single leader's will. It must survive transitions, elections, and reshuffles. Let independent bodies, not political offices, drive enforcement, because institutions must outlive personalities. Number 3, reform must be measured, not assumed. Every initiative must have metrics. How many tenders were digitized? How many audits were completed? How many officials were sanctioned? Let dashboards replace declarations, because what is not measured is rarely improved. 4th, reform must be incentivized, not just punitive. Integrity must be rewarded. Departments that deliver ethically must be recognized. Officers who uphold transparency must be promoted. Let public service become a career of dignity, not survival, because culture shifts when virtue is visible. And 5th, reform must be monitored by citizens. Civil society, media, and community platforms must be empowered to track progress. Let citizens report delays, flag irregularities, and access public data. Because when the public becomes the auditor, institutions begin to behave. Let us build systems that do not just punish corruption, but prevent it. And let our institutions learn that integrity is not a campaign, it is a condition. Because lasting change is not declared, it is demonstrated. And when behavior shifts, governance begins to heal.
Thank you, Professor. For young professionals entering public service, what message would you offer about integrity and responsibility?
Thank you, Advocate. To every young professional stepping into public service, you are not just joining an institution. You are inheriting a covenant of trust, of duty, and of sovereign consequence. Integrity is not a slogan. It is your signature. It is the quiet decision to do what is right when no one is watching. It is the refusal to trade principle for privilege. And it is the understanding that public office is not a shortcut to status, but a long road to service. Responsibility is not a burden, it is a calling. It means showing up prepared. It means delivering on time. It means treating every citizen with integrity, whether they whisper or shout. You will be tested. You will be tempted. You will be told, this is just how things work. But you must remember, you were not hired to conform. You were called to transform. Let your conduct be a mirror of the future you believe in. Let your decisions reflect the nation you want to build. And let your legacy be measured not by what you gained, but by what you gave. Because the continent is watching, and it does not need more officials. It needs more stewards, more guardians, more professionals who understand that integrity is not an accessory. It is the architecture of public trust. Step forward with courage, serve with clarity, and lead with consequence.
Thank you, Professor. What's the long-term cost, economically and socially, of treating corruption as a viable career path?
Thank you, Advocate. Treating corruption as a viable career path is not just a moral failure. It is a generational debt. It mortgages the future to fund the illusion of success, and the cost, both economic and social, is catastrophic. Economically, corruption distorts the engine of development. So, it misallocates resources, it inflates contracts, it repels investment, and it erodes productivity. When public funds are siphoned into private pockets, infrastructure stalls, education systems decay, and the healthcare collapses. The World Economic Forum estimates that corruption drains over 1.26 trillion annually from developing economies, a figure large enough to lift every person living in extreme poverty above the threshold. In Eswatini and across Africa, this means roads that remain unbuilt despite full budgets, clinics that open without medicine, schools that teach without tools, and economies that grow on paper but shrink in reality. Socially, the damage is deeper and more dangerous. Corruption teaches the youth that integrity is irrelevant. It rewards manipulation over merit, and it converts public service into private enterprise. When corruption becomes a career path, society begins to celebrate theft as a strategy. They call them tycoons, but they are thieves in reality. The honest are sidelined, the competent are silenced, and the public loses faith in the very institutions meant to protect them. This breeds cynicism, it fuels emigration, and it fractures the social contract between citizens and the state. The long-term cost is not just economic stagnation, it is civic erosion. It is the quiet collapse of trust, the normalization of betrayal, and the institutionalization of injustice. Let Eswatini reject this trajectory with sovereign clarity. Let us elevate integrity as aspiration, not anomaly. Let us build systems that reward service, not sabotage. And let us remind the continent, corruption is not a career, it is a collapse. And we must choose differently.
Thank you, Professor. Finally, if you were designing a national anti-corruption charter, what core pillars would it include to make it truly transformative?
Thank you, Advocate. A national anti-corruption charter must be more than a declaration. It must be a design, a sovereign blueprint that transforms ethics from aspiration to architecture. To be truly transformative, it must rest on 7 core pillars, each one calibrated to shift culture, strengthen institutions, and restore public trust. Number 1, transparency and public access. Let every contract, budget, and decision be visible. Digitize procurement, publish tenders, open data portals, because corruption thrives in darkness, and transparency is the light. 2, accountability and enforcement. Codify consequence. Establish independent anti-corruption bodies with prosecutorial power. Ensure that investigations are timely, impartial, and public. Let impunity be dismantled, not debated. 3, whistleblower protection and civic shielding. Protect those who speak. Legislate anonymity, shield against retaliation, and reward disclosures. Let whistleblowers be honored, not haunted. Because silence is not safety, it is surrender. 4, ethical leadership and asset disclosure. Require mandatory asset declarations for all senior officials. Conduct lifestyle audits. Link promotion to integrity, not proximity. Let leadership model the ethics it demands. And number 5, institutional reform and capacity building. Re-engineer systems that enable abuse. Train auditors. Digitize workflows. And embed ethics into every department. Let reform be structural, not seasonal. Number 6, civic engagement and education. Teach integrity from the classroom to the cabinet. Fund civic platforms. Empower youth to monitor, report, and reform. Let ethics become a national language, not just a legal clause. 7th, regional and continental alignment. Let's align with the African Union protocols and regional compacts. Share data, benchmark progress, and build a pan-African integrity framework that transcends borders. Let it speak not just to policy, but to possibility. Let it remind every citizen that corruption is not a culture, it is a choice, and that integrity, when institutionalized, becomes irreversible, because transformation is not declared, it is designed. And this charter must be the blueprint. Thank you, Advocate, for having me.
Thank you, Professor, for exposing the architecture of theft behind the facade of government. Your call to consequences reminds us that corruption is not just a crime, it is a curriculum, and that integrity must be institutionalized, not idealized. To our audience, if you are ready to credential accountability, protect public value, and design systems where ethics are enforceable, Springfield Research University stands ready. Visit www.springfieldresearchuniversity.net and join the mission to build a continent where integrity is not optional. That brings us to the end of this accountability edition of Springfield Career Insights. May tonight's reflections sharpen your scrutiny and strengthen your stance. I am Clarence, your host. Good night.
Siyakupuga tikitile futsanza lunga kiwa hey 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 siyakupuga sonke siyavumelana ngemjululo muhle sonke similela